Okay, so we are in episode 3 of Beowulf, page 11. We just left after episode 2. Grendel had been attacking the Danes. Hrothgar was sad. He had kind of exhausted all of his resources. None of the warriors of Danish descent were able to defeat Grendel. And actually the narrator states at the end of episode 2 that if they were to pray to Christian gods, then perhaps they would have been saved. Now we have to understand that this was inserted by a later translator, as the poet himself would never say that to a group of warriors. So let's start episode 3 on page 11. So the living sorrow of Healfdene's son simmered, bitter and fresh, and no wisdom or strength could break it. That agony hung on king and people alike, harsh and unending, violent and cruel and evil. In his far-off home, Beowulf, Hygelac's follower and the strongest of the Geats, greater and stronger than anyone anywhere in the world, heard how Grendel filled knights with horror and quickly commanded a boat fitted out, proclaiming that he'd go to that famous king, would sail across the sea to Hrothgar, now when help was needed. None of the wise ones regretted his going, much as he was loved by the Geats. The omens were good, and they urged the adventure on. So this is an example of courage and bravery for your theme tracker. The fact that Beowulf is willing to go and risk his life in order to save another country and another king's people is extremely brave. Also, on line 195, when they name Beowulf or call Beowulf Hygelac's follower and the strongest of Geats, that's an epithet. So on your characteristics and conventions chart, you can put down line 195. Okay, picking up. So Beowulf chose the mightiest men he could find, the bravest and best of the Geats, 14 in all, and led them down to their boat. He knew the sea, would point the prow straight to that distant Danish shore. Then they sailed, set their ship out on the waves under the cliffs. Ready for what came, they wound through the currents, the seas beating at the sand, and were borne in the lap of their shining ship, lined with gleaming armor, going safely in their oak-hard boat to where their hearts took them. So they travel across the ocean. So this would go under your characteristics and conventions under vast setting, where you could say that they move from Geatland to Denmark across an ocean. So we're covering a large actual physical place. The wind hurried them over the waves. The ship foamed through the sea like a bird until, in the time they had known it would take, standing in the round-curled prow, they could see sparkling hills high and green. Jutting up over the shore and rejoicing in those rock-steep cliffs, they quietly ended their voyage. Jumping to the ground, the Geats pushed their boat to the sand and tied it in place, mail shirts and armor rattling as they swiftly moored their ship. And then they gave thanks to God for their easy crossing. So again, on your theme tracker, under religion, Beowulf and his men arrive safely, and they believe it's because of the blessings of God. That's line 228. High on a wall, a Danish watcher, patrolling along the cliff, saw the travelers crossing to the shore, their shields raised and shining. He came riding down, Hrothgar's lieutenant, spurring his horse, needing to know why they landed, these men in armor. Shaking his heavy spear in their faces, he spoke, "Whose soldiers are you? You who've been carried in your deep-keeled ship across the sea road to the country of mine. Listen, I've stood on these cliffs longer than you know, keeping our coast free of pirates, raiders sneaking ashore from their ships, seeking our lives and our gold. None have ever come so openly. And yet you've offered no password, no sign from my prince, no permission from my people for your landing here. Nor have I ever seen, out of all the men on earth, one greater than has come with you. No commoner carries such weapons, unless his appearance and his beauty are both lies. You, tell me your name, and your father's. No spies go further into Danish soil than you've already come. Strangers, from wherever it was you sailed, tell it, and tell it quickly. The quicker the better, I say, for us all. Speak, say exactly who you are, and from where and why." So we end episode 3 with the questioning of Beowulf and his men by the sentinel, the guard on the coast. He makes a couple of really interesting observations. He says that he's never seen anybody come so, or land so openly. That is evidence of not only Beowulf's courage or bravery, but also his identity. He's very secure in who he is, and he knows that he is the savior of these people. And so he almost is arrogant. His arrogance will, at times, get him into trouble. The Sentinel also talks about how no one has ever been adorned as beautifully as these men were, with their armor, their shields, their coats of mail. So under wealth, under your theme tracker, you can also talk about the actual physical beauty of their armor and their shields, which translate into wealth, which their wealth identifies them as brave and courageous warriors. Also, on line 238, when he says, you who've been carried in your deep-keeled ship is an epithet. Okay, you can put that on your characteristics and conventions chart. Okay, so that is episode 3.